Today we're going to review this painting by Joseph Zbukvic. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. And as you requested, I saw that a lot of people enjoyed the previous painting review video of Alvaro Castanet's painting. So I decided to make another one. And what a better artist is there to continue this series than Joseph Zbukvic, who is probably my favorite at the moment. I love both of these artists' work and many others, but these two are like, that's the golden age of me discovering what I like and what I enjoy. So I chose that picture from, I believe it's from Tuscany, Italy, which I'm going to visit soon. So that's a good subject to start with. And I just love this one. There's so much going on there that I think we can learn from, which is really why I want to do this video, okay? I think there's a lot in terms of the technique and the approach, and the things he does there are very smart. And I think there's a lot of value to be taken from that. I still didn't try to recreate the painting, though I may do that in a separate video, okay? But I do have that on my mind, and I do plan on making some kind of an effort like this at some point in the near future, hopefully. But what I will do is a lot of paintings from Tuscany as well. So anyway, let's jump straight into the action and talk a bit about this painting and see what we can learn together from it.
So let's get started, and I have my pointers ready next to me. I was asked to try and make these videos shorter or maybe ramble less. It's not really my communication style. I do best when I talk freely, but I will try to stick to my points a little more, just so that it's a little more well organized, I guess. So the first thing I notice about this painting is how in terms of the atmosphere and the mood, this is the one thing that really sticks out for me. So it's very clear, to me at least, that this is kind of a midday, very strong, well-lit scene, very strong sunlight. The way I can see this is by the sharp contrasts and the shadows, and especially next to the trees. In terms of the light, it actually comes from the right side, very slightly, and the reason the reason I could tell this is by the shadows under the trees, and I'm going to zoom in on one of them for you just so you can better see this. So you can see here we have this shadow, very strong shadows with strong contrasts also under the buildings. You can see this also very clearly here in the building, to the left of the building. And so yeah, initially, funny enough, I thought the light came from behind the mountain because of the hazy feeling, but that really doesn't make sense, because then it would have probably been much darker. But in any case, I'm not sure I zoomed out all the way. Okay, here we go. So this is it in terms of the light and the mood and atmosphere. Now, the one thing that really makes this look amazing, in my opinion, is the way he conveyed the depth. Okay, so you can see here there's this mountain, and it all starts with a very gray blue color, and then it slowly turns into green and more vibrant, and a little more. You can see there's even a little bit of brown in the fields here, okay, in this area. I'm clicking so you can see where my mouse is, but hopefully you can follow. And then we have, of course, the rooftops. You can see some rooftops that maybe have been dimmed here and there on purpose. Let me zoom in on that area as well. You can see this here. And he probably wanted to keep them less vibrant so that they don't pop out too much, let's say. There's also one interesting thing that I started experiencing. I just want to reiterate, the feeling of scale here is really good. Now, in terms of the abstraction, you can see the way he built the mountain here, and I'm really curious about how he faded it, because it looks like there is some wet and wet involved here, but then there's also the wet on dry here. But anyway, you see him skipping around some areas, leaving highlights here and there just for trees, or maybe even roofs of buildings or something like this. Here he's hinting at roads. We're going to talk about that in just a few moments. And then the shadow of the mountain spreads directly into the midground. Okay, so you can see this really around this area here. You can see the under that shadow there's the fields that he negative painted around, and this goes to show you, and you can see this also here, there's very faded details of crops or something like this. Here you can see also the road kind of originally went all the way up to here, so it's really unclear where the mountain starts, but it does give you a really amazing feeling of depth and scale. And I find that scale is something that's really hard to convey. Now, the drawing, of course, is pretty accurate as well, as far as I can see. All of the roads winding coming from one point perspective or maybe multiple perspectives, and there's a really good feeling of that. One more thing is the edges. So the more in the distance we are, the more the edges are less defined and you can't really tell. But then if you move forward, you can see these types of bolder brush strokes, very dry, and the thing is with dry brush is that you can immediately indicate some details. So if we zoom in on that area, you can see that all of these dry brushes hint maybe that there's sort of I don't know if it's a road, but just details like maybe fences or lines of low-hanging foliage, something like this. In the trees as well, you can see some dry technique, which makes them look like there's a lot of details in them, but they were probably done in like 1, 2, 3 brush strokes, and that's it. So this very harsh edges are very visible here in the foreground. Also on the road you can see this, and the road of course is very light. It probably reflects much more light than the fields because it's smoother. That's what usually happens. Something that's smoother can reflect more light more easily. So in any case, yeah, that's it in terms of the dry brush. Now, another interesting thing that I do want to mention regarding the dry brush is notice how the closer we get to the edges of the fields, so around here and around here, you can see that there's really more of a dry brush feeling, but that is not necessarily to add details, because you see this, for example, is it a tree? Probably, it looks like a tree, but it's very light and very dry brush, and the reason is not to take from the attention here on these trees. Okay, so and also here on the side you can see this as well, next to this tree. It's just put in there very quickly, very dry brush. Even though it's in the distance, it still has been dry brushed in to just to allow it to blend into the edges of the painting. Next up, the roofs are actually darker than you would think, so they look pretty light here. It looks like there's a strong contrast, but I'm going to show you the black and white version. So they are lighter, but not necessarily as light as you'd think. But the thing he did very wisely here, Joseph Zbukvic, is that he placed very strategically the trees behind the rooftops to make them pop. So you can see here the trees, they really help hint at this line. And this is really important. This line is really visible thanks to the tree in the back. Also here, you can see the line of the roof, and then there's the tree here. He did it in multiple places here as well. All of the shapes of these roofs are actually rooftops are actually become more visible thanks to the trees in the back. And let's go back to our colorful version so you can even better see the separation. So because the values aren't as light as you'd maybe think, most of the separation on the rooftops is actually done with the color, funny enough, because in colors is not something I talk about a lot because it's really secondary to me. However, when you go maybe at a higher level, you can pay more attention to color as well, and you can see here that the red contrasts with, first off, the greens, all of the greens in the roads and the crops in the fields and in the trees, obviously, but also it contrasts with the walls. So you can see here the walls are very blue to indicate they're darker, and probably because maybe the sun comes from the top, slightly from the right, as I mentioned, you can see here in the shadow, but still from the top. And so the roofs probably cast strong shadow. The edges of the rooftops cast pretty strong shadows on the walls, and this is what we get. We also get a very dark and crisp shadow around the bottom of the walls, and this is something that's incredibly important as well here. So yeah, we talked about that. Now, one more thing I want to mention is you see these crops here. I was wondering how he achieved that effect. I really wasn't sure, but it seems like there was some negative painting involved. So maybe he painted around these lighter areas. You can see this here as well, even better. So you can see the difference between this light value and this darker value, okay? These two areas. So the same thing happens probably here. He probably negative painted around these areas, leaving them lighter, and then came back and did wet in wet with an even darker color to have that feeling of waviness, I guess, for trees or crops, lines of olive trees, maybe it could be many things, lettuce even. So it just gives off that feeling. Maybe even used something like a brown here or a bit of red. You can see there's a bit of red and brown in the green here. A very strong sunlight on this rooftop as well. Very interesting what's going on here. One more thing I want to divert your attention to, that's probably the last point for this video, is I want you to take a look at these lines here. You can see these are the roads, and they of course conform to the perspective of the entire painting, so you can see them winding into the distance. The one thing, they were done with thick white paint, and I can tell this immediately, and let me show you how. So if you look at this line, it's obvious that it glazes, it's glazed over the green in the background. Here as well, it's just, there is no way to get that done in just negative painting. It looks too crisp. And on the other hand, with these lines, I would highly doubt that this was done by negative painting. It could be masking fluid, but I know he doesn't really use that much masking fluid, so it's probably just very dry brushstroke of thick paint, really thick paint here, less thick in this line because it's quite transparent and you can see right through it. Okay, one more thing that I just noticed, take a look at this building here, very nice abstraction near the edges, and I really like the effect that he created here. So overall, just in terms of how he did this painting, I think what happened was he did, and sorry for moving this around a lot, I think there was one wash from the top to the bottom that he started and made darker and darker as he went along, just to hint that the horizon line is actually somewhere around here, because you can see the road coming up here. So maybe we're looking at it at an angle where the horizon line is quite high, which makes sense because the point of view is really high. And then he started darkening it the more he went downwards, but here he started using green, very light grayed out green, because you can see this in the fields here as well. So they probably kept going with this green all the way here, just being careful around the road and some highlights maybe for the walls of the rooftops, and some dry brush here for the details like sheep or cows or something that he would choose to later on put in here. Next up, there was a wash that started probably with this mountain from the top, lots of abstractions just to hint maybe at a tree line or something like that. And smoothen it out all the way here to the bottom, okay? And then blend this edge, but here keep it quite dark. And it kind of bled all the way to the actual crops while using negative painting, just to hint at some lighter areas, maybe shadows being cast by trees or something like this. And then there was probably done another wash that you can see here, the one that he kind of negative painted around the previous green. And then I would say probably the rooftops, the walls of the buildings, the trees, and all of that was put in. And finally some dry brushes, maybe for the windows, or maybe not dry, but just super dark for the sides of the road and all of that. So probably like 3 or 4 layers, and this was done. This is how I think he did it. I do plan on, in the near future, do a recreation of a painting. Maybe I'll separate it, because this painting is one I do want to try and recreate. So I'll probably do that, but maybe in a future video, okay? Because this video is already 12 minutes, just the review. So yeah, so this is it. This is everything I wanted to cover in terms of this painting. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let's wrap up this video.
So this is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's really fun for me to just share what I see in these kinds of works, and I find that the more I improve, it's kind of like I see them in a different light. In the beginning, I don't notice some things, but I remember when I discovered these few artists, and immediately I was taken aback by the quality of the painting, and it would always make me wonder, how do they do that? And after a while, now I feel like I'm in a better place to understand how things were done. and I see a lot of things I wasn't aware of in the past, and I kind of can shift between seeing the painting as a painting, as final work, and seeing the actual brush strokes and seeing it for what it is in a more abstract manner. It's very hard, it's very challenging, but if you've been doing this for a long time, you probably can relate to this experience of, for example, you see the reflections on the water in some kind of a scene, and you can see the individual brush strokes, and for a moment it's not a reflection of a boat on the water or a shadow of a boat. For a few moments it's actually brush strokes, and you can see it for what it is, but it's very hard. And being detached in that way can really help you see the painting and understand the technique behind it, because when you just look at it and you're like, whoa, that's like realistic, it's hard to tell how it was done. It's kind of like listening to a song and breaking it down into its composition and into the harmonies and really figuring out everything, and then you kind of don't listen to the song anymore, but you listen to the individual parts of it. It can actually ruin the fun sometimes, so I don't know if I recommend it. But in any case, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something new with me today. And this is the goal really of these videos, to learn together what we can learn from other artists, to learn what we can learn, to learn new things from artists that are way more experienced than us, okay? So thank you so much. Do check out the links in the description box. I'll put a link to my Instagram if you want to see my works in progress, okay? I think it's really interesting, and just final paintings and things like this. I do try to constantly improve my skills so that I can provide better lessons for you. Also my Patreon page, which is the best place to support me if you want to. This will really help me towards my goal of renting out a studio really soon, in the near future, in the next few months. Also check out my podcast below. Everything is going to be linked. If this is the first video of me you see, make sure to subscribe, because I have tons of videos like this one, new videos. This is a new series, but I have another one like this one and a lot of different videos, and also painting reviews of my own paintings and things like this, really interesting stuff. And if it's your first video, I want to welcome you to my channel, because I do see that from time to time. Thank you so much, and I will see you again in another vid really, really soon.